A paddle steamer is a steamship or riverboat powered by a steam engine that drives paddle wheels to propel the craft through the water. In antiquity, paddle wheelers followed the development of poles, oars and sails, where the first uses were wheelers driven by animals or humans. Modern paddle wheelers may be powered by diesel engines, save for tourism and small pleasure boats. Paddle propulsion is largely superseded by the screw propeller and other marine propulsion systems that have a higher efficiency, especially in rough or open water. Paddle wheels. The paddle wheel is a large steel framework wheel. The outer edge of the wheel is fitted with numerous regularly spaced paddle blades. The bottom quarter or so of the wheel travels underwater. An engine rotates the paddle wheel in the water to produce thrust, forward or backward as required. More advanced paddle wheel designs feature feathering methods that keep each paddle blade closer to vertical while in the water to increase efficiency. The upper part of a paddle wheel is normally enclosed in a paddle box to minimize splashing. Types of paddle steamers. There are two basic ways to mount paddle wheels on a ship, either a single wheel on the rear, known as a stern wheeler, or a paddle wheel on each side, known as a side wheeler. Both stern wheelers and side wheelers were used as riverboats in the United States. Some still operate for tourists, for example on the Mississippi River. Side wheelers are used as riverboats and as coastal craft, though the side wheels and enclosing sponsons make them wider than stern wheelers. They may be more maneuverable, since they can sometimes move the paddles at different speeds, and even in opposite directions. This extra maneuverability makes side wheelers popular on the narrower, winding rivers of the Murray-Darling system in Australia, where a number still operate. European sidewheelers, such as the PS Waverley, connect the wheels with solid drive shafts that limit maneuverability and give the craft a wide turning radius. Some were built with paddle clutches that disengage one or both paddles so they can turn independently. However, wisdom gained from early experience with sidewheelers deemed that they be operated with clutches out, or as solid shaft vessels. Crews noticed that as ships approached the dock, passengers moved to the side of the ship ready to disembark. The shift in weight, added to independent movements of the paddles, could lead to imbalance and potential capsizing. Paddle tugs were frequently operated with clutches in, as the lack of passengers aboard meant that independent paddle movement could be used safely and the added maneuverability exploited to the full. Feathering paddle wheel. In a simple paddle wheel, where the paddles are fixed around the periphery, power is lost due to churning of the water as the paddles enter and leave the water surface. Ideally, the paddles should remain vertical while underwater. This ideal can be approximated by use of levers and linkages connected to a fixed eccentric. The eccentric is fixed slightly forward of the main wheel center. It is coupled to each paddle via a rod and lever. The geometry is designed such that the paddles are kept almost vertical for the short duration that they are in the water. History. Western world. The use of a paddle wheel in navigation appears for the first time in the mechanical treatise of the Roman engineer Vitruvius, where he describes multi-geared paddle wheels working as a ship odometer. The first mention of paddle wheels as a means of propulsion comes from the 4th–5th century military treatise De Rebus Bellicis, where the anonymous Roman author describes an ox-driven paddle wheel warship. The Italian physician Guido da Vivano, planning for a new crusade, made illustrations for a paddle boat that was propelled by manually turned compound cranks. One of the drawings of the anonymous author of the Hussite Wars shows a boat with a pair of paddle wheels at each end turned by men operating compound cranks. The concept was improved by the Italian Roberto Valturio in 1463, who devised a boat with 5 sets, where the parallel cranks are all joined to a single power power source by one connecting rod, an idea adopted by his compatriot Francesco di Giorgio. In 1704, the French physicist Denis Papin constructed the first ship powered by his steam engine, mechanically linked to paddles. This made him the first to construct a steam-powered boat. Then he has poured the first steam cylinder of the world in the iron foundry Wekerhagen. In 1787, Patrick Miller of Dalswinton invented a double-hulled boat that was propelled on the Firth of Forth by men working a capstan that drove paddles on each side. One of the first functioning steamships, the Parmapede, which was also the first paddle steamer, was built in France in 1774 by Marquis Claude de Jouffroy and his colleagues. The 13-meter steamer with rotating paddle sailed on the Doubs River in June and July 1776. In 1783, a new paddle steamer by de Jouffroy, Virus-Café, successfully steamed up the River Seine for 15 minutes before the engine failed. Bureaucracy and the French Revolution thwarted further progress by de Jouffroy. The next successful attempt at a paddle-driven steamship was by the Scottish engineer William Symington, who suggested steam power to Patrick Miller of Dalswinton. Experimental boats built in 1788 and 1789 worked successfully on Loch Maben Loch. In 1802, Symington built a barge hauler, Charlotte Dundas, for the Forth and Clyde Canal Company. It successfully hauled two 70-ton barges almost 20 miles in 6 hours against a strong headwind on test in 1802. There was much enthusiasm, but some directors of the company were concerned about the banks of the canal being damaged by the wash from a powered vessel, and no more were ordered. While Charlotte Dundas was the first commercial paddle steamer and steamboat, the first commercial success was possibly Robert Fulton's Claremont in New York, which went into commercial service in 1807 between New York City and Albany. Many other paddle-equipped riverboats followed all around the world. In 1812, the first U.S. Mississippi River paddle steamer began operating out of New Orleans. By 1814, Captain Henry Shreve had developed a steamboat suitable for local conditions. Landings in New Orleans went from 21 in 1814 to 191 in 1819, and over 1,200 in 1833. The first stern-wheeler was built by Mr. Rutgers at Rotterdam, and used between Antwerp and Ghent in 1827. Steamboats, paddle boats driven by horses, were used for ferries the United States from the 1820s–1850s, as they were economical and did not incur licensing costs imposed by the steam navigation monopoly. In the 1850s, they were replaced by steamboats. After the American Civil War, as the expanding railroads took many passengers, the traffic became primarily bulk cargoes. The largest, and one of the last, paddle steamers on the Mississippi was the stern-wheeler Spray. Built in 1901, she pushed coal and petroleum until 1948. East Asia. The first mention of a paddle-wheel ship from China is in the History of the Southern Dynasties, compiled in the 7th century but describing the naval ships of the Liu Song dynasty used by Admiral Wang Zhen in his campaign against the Qiang people in 418 AD. The mathematician and astronomer Zhu Chongzhi had a paddle-wheel ship built on the Xinting River known as the Thousand-League Boat. When campaigning against Hu Jing in 552, the Liang dynasty Admiral Zhu shipper employed paddle-wheel boats called water-wheel boats. At the siege of Liang in 573, the Admiral Hu Wang Faqiu employed foot-treadle-powered powered paddle wheel boats. A successful paddle wheel warship design was made in China by Prince Li Gao in 784 AD, during an imperial examination of the provinces by the Tang dynasty emperor. The Chinese Song dynasty issued the construction of many paddle wheel ships for its standing navy, and according to historian Joseph Needham, between 1132 and 1183 a great number of treadmill-operated paddle wheel craft, large and small, were built, including stern-wheelers and ships with as many as 11 paddle wheels a side. The standard Chinese term, wheel ship, was used by the Song period, whereas a litany of colorful terms were used to describe it beforehand. In the 12th century, the Song government used paddle wheel ships en masse to defeat opposing armies of pirates armed with their own paddle wheel ships. At the Battle of Kaishi in 1161, paddle wheelers were also used with great success against the Jin dynasty navy. The Chinese used the paddle wheel ship even during the First Opium War and for transport around the Pearl River during the early 20th century. Seagoing paddle steamers. The first seagoing trip of a paddle steamer was by the Albany in 1808. It steamed from the Hudson River along the coast to the Delaware River. This was purely for the purpose of moving a riverboat to a new market, but paddle steamers began regular short coastal trips soon after. In 1816, Pierre Andriel, a French businessman, bought in London the 15 HP paddle steamer Marjorie and made an eventful London-Le Havre-Paris crossing, encountering heavy weather on the way. He later operated his ship as a river packet on the Seine, between Paris and Le Havre. The first paddle steamer to make a long ocean voyage crossing the Atlantic Ocean was SS Savannah, built in 1819 expressly for this service. Savannah set out for Liverpool on May 22, 1819, sighting Ireland after 23 days at sea. This was the first powered crossing of the Atlantic. Although Savannah was built as a sailing ship with a steam auxiliary, she also carried a full rig of sail for when winds were favorable, being unable to complete the voyage under power alone. In 1822, Charles Napier's Aaron Manby, the world's first iron ship, made the first direct steam crossing from London to Paris and the first seagoing voyage by an iron ship. In 1838, Sirius, a fairly small steam packet built for the Cork to London route, became the first vessel to cross the Atlantic under sustained steam power, beating Isambard Kingdom Brunel's much larger Great Western by day. Great Western, however, was actually built for the transatlantic trade, and so had sufficient coal for the passage. Sirius had to burn furniture and other items after running out of coal. The Great Western's more successful crossing began the regular sailing of powered vessels across the Atlantic. Beaver was the first coastal steamship to operate in the Pacific Northwest of North America. Paddle steamers helped open Japan to the Western world in the mid-19th century. The largest paddle steamer ever built was Brunel's Great Eastern, but it also had screw propulsion and sail rigging. It was 692 feet long and weighed 32,000 tons, its paddle wheels being 56 feet in diameter. In ocean-going service, paddle steamers became much less useful after the invention of the screw propeller, but they remained in use in coastal service and as river tugboats, thanks to the shallow draft and good maneuverability. The last crossing of the Atlantic by paddle steamer began on September 18, 1969, to conclude 6 months and 9 days later. The steam paddle tug Appleton Hall was never intended for ocean-going service, but was steamed from Newcastle to San Francisco. As the voyage was intended to be completed under power, the tug was rigged as steam-propelled with the sail auxiliary. The transatlantic stage of the voyage was completed exactly 150 years after the voyage of the Savannah. Modern paddle steamers. USA and Canada. A few paddle steamers serve niche tourism needs as cruise boats on lakes, and others, such as the Delta Queen, still operate on the Mississippi River. In Oregon, several replica paddle steamers, which are non-steam powered stern-wheelers built in the 1980s and later, are operated for tourism purposes on the Columbia and Willamette rivers. Wolverine, built in 1912 as the PS&B, was the biggest passenger-carrying paddle steamer ever built. With a capacity for 6,000 passengers, it was converted to a training aircraft carrier during World War II. PS Washington Irving, also built in 1912 with a capacity for 6,000 passengers, operated on the Hudson River from 1913 until it was sunk in an accident in 1926. One of the last paddle steamers built in the U.S. was the dredge William M. Black, built in 1934 and now a National Historic Landmark. The Belle of Louisville is the oldest operating Mississippi River-style steamboat and was named a National Historic Landmark in 1989. Previously named the Idlewild and Avalon, the Belle is based in downtown Louisville, Kentucky. The Shelburne Museum of Vermont features the paddle steamer Ticonderoga, a preserved Lake Champlain ferry, which was transported overland to the museum after being retired from service in 1969, and is now open for tours. The Toronto Island Ferry System in Toronto, Canada operates PS Trillium, a paddle steamer originally built in 1910 and restored for operation since 1976. Germany. The Elbe River Saxon paddle steamer fleet in Dresden, Germany, is the oldest and biggest in the world, with around 700,000 passengers per year. The 1913-built Goethe was the last paddle steamer on the River Rhine, previously the world's largest side-wheeler with a two-cylinder steam engine of 700 horsepower, a length of 83 meters and a height above water of 9.2 meters. The Goethe was converted to diesel hydraulic power during the winter of 2008-09. Paddle wheelers are still in operation on some lakes in southern Bavaria, such as the Diesen on Ammer Sea, built in 1908 and converted to a diesel system in 1975. It has been completely rebuilt in 2006. As paddle wheelers have proven to be such a great tourist attraction, a new one was even built in 2002 on Ammersee, the Hersching, but of course it has never been powered by steam. On Lake Chiemsee, RMS Ludwig Fessler is still in regular service. It was built in 1926, but is now also powered by diesel engines. The original diesel engine was the last ship engine being built by Maffei. Interestingly, this engine has ended up in Switzerland to drive the newly renovated Neuchâtel, launched in 2013. Italy. In Italy, a small paddle steamer fleet operates on Lake Como and Lake Garda, primarily for tourists. Norway. PS Skibladner is the oldest steamship in regular operation. Built in 1856, she still operates on Lake Josa in Norway. Switzerland. Switzerland has a large paddle steamer fleet, most of the Salon steamer type, built by Sulzer in Winterthur or Escher-Wissens, Europe. There are 5 active and 1 inactive on Lake Lucerne, 2 on Lake Zurich, and 1 each on Lake Brienz, Lake Thun and Lake Constance. Swiss company CGN operates a number of paddle steamers on Lake Geneva. The fleet includes 3 converted to diesel-electric power in the 1960s and 5 retaining steam. 1, Montreux, was reconverted in 2000 from diesel to an all-new steam engine. It is the world's first electronically remote-controlled steam engine and has operating costs similar to state-of-the-art diesels, while producing up to 90% less air pollution. Active vessels. Lakes of Biel, Morat and Neuchâtel. Lake Briens, Lochberg, Lake Geneva, Montreuil, Le Suisse 2, Savoie, Simplon, Rhône 3. Lake Lucerne, Stadt Luzern, Uri, Schiller, Gallia and Tlerwalden. Lake Thun, Blumleis-Alp. Lake Zurich, Stadt Zurich, Stadt Rapperswil. Note the oldest active Swiss steamship is the Greve with screw propulsion. France. No paddle ship is currently in operation in France as of 2015. In Lac d'Annecy, an almost intact paddle steamer called La France, resting on an even keel, can be visited by advanced divers. She was built, like most of its Swiss counterparts, by Eschewis in 1909 and ran a regular line around Lac d'Annecy. During WW2 the ship was laid up in Annecy and used as a prison by the German occupying forces and the Gestapo. La France made her last commercial voyage in 1965 and then fell into neglect and disrepair. Her owner had moored her some distance from the shore to save key fees, and she sprung an ice-related leak and sunk in March 1971. It is a popular sight among advanced divers, and almost intact time capsule due to the fresh and low-temperature water. Some divers even play underwater French billiard on the intact billiard table in the main lounge. Any hope of raising the ship is vain though. The hull was badly distorted when hitting the rocky lake bottom. United Kingdom. P.S. Waverley, built in 1947, is the last seagoing paddle steamer in the world. This ship sails a full season of cruises from ports around Britain, and sailed across the English Channel to commemorate the sinking of her predecessor of 1899 at the 1940 Battle of Dunkirk. On the Isle of Wight, P.S. Monarch takes trips on the River Medina. Monarch is a side-wheeler built at Chatham Historic Dockyard. In the River Dart, the P.S. Kingswear Castle operates short cruises from Dartmouth and trips between Dartmouth and Totnes at high tide. USSR. In the USSR, river paddle steamers of the type Josef Stalin, later renamed Ryazan-class steamships, were built until 1951. Between 1952 and 1959, ships of this type were built for the Soviet Union by Óbudajógyár Budapest factory in Hungary. In total, 75 type Josef Stalin Ryazan sidewheelers were built. They are 70 meters long and can carry up to 360 passengers. Few of them still remain in active service. Australia has a large collection of authentic and replica paddle steamers and paddle boats operating along the Murray and Darling rivers, and in other areas around the country. Echuca, Mwama has the largest fleet of paddle steamers in Australia, with 7 of them operating commercially and a large number of smaller privately owned vessels. P.S. Adelaide is the oldest wooden-hulled paddle steamer in the world. Built in 1866, she operates from the port of Echuca on Australia's Murray River, which has the largest fleet of paddle steamers in the world. P.S. Pevensey, built 1911 in Mwama and based in Echuca, is still working as a tourist attraction on the Murray River. The Pevensey also starred as the fictional paddle steamer Philadelphia in the TV series All the Rivers Run. P.S. Alexander Arbuthnot, built 1923 at Kundruk, named after the former owner of the Arbuthnot sawmills, works today as a tourist boat at the port of Echuca. P.S. Canberra, built 1913 at Goolwa, is currently operating public cruises in Echuca. Canberra was built for the Connor family of Boundary Bend as the flagship fishing vessel, however has been in the tourism industry since 1944. P.S. Emmylou, a replica steamer, was built in 1982 at Barham, and operates a large range of cruises in Echuca, from 1-hour sightseeing trips to 3-night, 4-day fully accommodated voyages. She is powered by an authentic steam engine, dating back to 1906. PS Murray Princess is the largest of the paddle wheelers operating in Australia, although she is a recent build. The Princess measures in around 210 feet in length, 45 feet in width, and has a remarkably shallow draft of 3 feet. It has accommodation for 120 passengers and up to 30 crew and operates 3, 4 and AMP-7 night cruises along the Murray from Mannheim in South Australia. The Murray Princess was owned and operated for many years by Captain Cook Cruises in Sydney, but has recently been sold to Sea-Link Travel Group based in Adelaide. The replica paddle steamer Curlup was constructed in Gippsland, Australia, and launched in November 2008. PS Kookaburra Queen services the Brisbane River, operating as a floating restaurant venue for hire. PS Enterprise, built in Echuca in 1876–78 and now berthed at a wharf on the Acton Peninsula, Lake Burley Griffin, Canberra, has been restored to full working order. Recommissioned after restoration, she was used on the Murray River, the Darling River and the Murrumbidgee River in New South Wales between 1978 and 1988. PS Marion, based at Mannheim, the Nepean Belle paddle wheeler operates cruises on the Nepean River at Penrith, NSW, New Zealand. The restored paddle steamer Waimarie is based in Whanganui, New Zealand. The Waimarie was built in kit set for Mint Poplar, London in 1899, and originally operated on the Whanganui River under the name Aotea. Later renamed, she remained in service until 1949. She sank at her moorings in 1952, and remained in the mud until raised by volunteers and restored to begin operations again in 2000. The 1907 Otunui paddleboat operated on the Whanganui River until the 1940s in her original form as a tunnel screw riverboat. Lost from her mooring in a flood, she was refloated in the late 1960s and rebuilt as a stern-wheel jetboat. Around 1982 she went overland to Lake Okataina and was converted to the side paddle vessel as she is today. Currently operating on the Wairoa River at Tauranga, this 17 meters diesel-powered vessel with hydraulic drive for the paddle wheels offers scenic cruises and charters. The Netherlands. The Carpentine Kok is a paddle steamer built in 1911 for ferry service on the River Lek. It was fully restored in 1976 and is still in use today as a party ship. Queen Beatrix chartered the ship in 1998 as part of her 60th birthday celebrations. Paddle steamer de Majestate was built in 1926. In 1958, a part of the movie G.I. Blues featuring Elvis Presley is shot on board of this ship. That's how the paddle steamer got her international fame. When the family Key buys this ship in 1993, the continuing of a unique maritime monument was certain. Rotterdam got a main attraction: paddle tugs. The Portland is a preserved steam-powered stern-wheel tug based in Portland, Oregon, that is listed on the U.S. National Register of Historic Places. The British Admiralty used diesel-electric paddle tugs in recent times. Each paddle wheel was driven by an individual electric motor, giving outstanding maneuverability. Paddle tugs were able to more easily make use of the inherent advantage of side-wheel paddle propulsion, having the option to disconnect the clutches that connected the paddle drive shafts as one. This enabled them to turn one paddle ahead and one astern to turn and maneuver quickly.